Welcome back to church. We're so excited that you're here today. If you're watching or you're listening to this podcast, I believe God has something amazing for you. You know, Matthew chapter 6 and 21 says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And so today we're going to kind of go a little bit off script, but kind of stay on script, right? And talk a little bit about a place where you can put your treasure. And practically, spiritually, I really believe this episode's really going to open your eyes to some things that are happening in our world, some things that are maybe happening in your finances and in your home. And our prayer is that we're able to share just some insight about something that we're passionate about, because God wants to bless you according to his riches and glory. He wants overflow in your life. He wants things to happen in your life. But also part of that blessing is him applying knowledge to your life and allowing you to move through it. You know, so I think sometimes we think that it's just going to fall out of the sky and it's, you know, but if you're not financially, if you don't have financial, if you're not financially smart, you're not financially educated, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't how much money you keep. If you don't know what to do with it, you know, it's going to eventually kind of just go away in spaces you didn't even see coming. And so I think I've been blessed by being a friend of Jason, and he has put me on to this thing we're talking about today. And so I'm going to kick this episode off. And if you didn't know us, right, then you probably don't know that today we're talking about Bitcoin. So we've done this. I think we've done this like one time before, and we sprinkle it in episodes. But today we're going to run it back, and I'm going to ask some questions that I wanted to know when I didn't know about Bitcoin. What is it? Right. And kind of how can I apply it to my life? And is it necessary? Is it just hype? Right. And so, Jason, that's my first question for you. Number one, explain what is Bitcoin?
So what I would say, in the easiest, most simplest terms that I could describe it, Bitcoin is irrefutable, unchangeable store of value. It is money that cannot be corrupted. That is the simplest answer. That's why I enjoy it so much. As we dive into the details and as people ask questions in theory, like in their head right away, I know advocating for Bitcoin as incorruptible, people have 1,000 questions, they have doubts, and that's okay. I talk to people all the time that kind of question the validity of it. It's something you don't understand, so you immediately question it. That's human nature, and I think that's smart to question things you don't understand and don't just accept what somebody's saying on face value. The reason we're doing an entire episode on Bitcoin today is because I'm getting more and more questions. It's becoming more and more relevant to people, but I want to really spend time dissecting it so it doesn't just sound like we're what people call crypto bros. We're not just excited because it's a new thing. I'm excited about Bitcoin because it's a real thing that really will help you save your value, your time and energy across time and space. If I may, you asked me what Bitcoin is. Incorruptible money was my answer. Well, I think it's really important to answer one question before that for people. And like, it's something we take for granted. Ooh. What is money? And I have to give, what is money? Right. And so I've gotten a lot of different answers. It's a piece of paper with presidents' faces on it. What is money? It's a way we transact. It's a currency. People, and I understand, I ask it as like an abstract question because the answer is a little abstract. What money actually is, just for anybody listening, and this is not an original idea. A lot of these are not. It's an accumulation of ideas that I've gotten from people maybe smarter than me or just had more insight than I did. Jack Mallers, who owns Strike, a Bitcoin-only company, had maybe the best definition I've ever heard. And I don't know if he pulled it from somewhere else, but I want to give credit where credit's due. Somebody asked Jack what money is, and he has now simplified and condensed his definition to this. It is your time and energy in abstract form. That's it. So you go to work, you earn a wage, and that wage is agreed upon by you and the employer because that employer does a certain thing and they make money and they decide that you are worth a certain percentage of that money in order to continue their ability to make more money. Make sense? So if I'm a famous athlete and Nike comes to me and says, look, we make billions of dollars, but we think signing you and paying you a couple million will make us another 100 million. Well, that makes sense for you because you go from making 0 on a shoe deal to 2 million. And it makes sense for Nike because they sell $100 million worth of shoes. So for 2% investment, they're making their money back plus, right? They make 98% on their 2 million. And now you have $2 million for your family. Same thing happens when you go to any workplace. If you go to McDonald's, you agree to an hourly wage that they think is a fair percentage of the work being produced, the McDonald's time and energy, right? And the goods that they produce are all based on time and energy. To produce a cheeseburger takes this much time and energy. So that's a cost. Now we think you're worth this much in order to be able to sell our cheeseburgers to people. And if you're not worth the money, then you usually get fired, or you get challenged to become more valuable, or you get fired. Like that's why people get fired, because they are no longer worth the value, the time and energy that company is sharing with them in order to produce their goods. So that's all money is. So then you store your time and energy in your money, right? So what do? We throw it into 401ks. We put it into savings accounts. We do these things to try to protect our time and energy. Okay. And as we're protecting our time and energy, unfortunately, the truth is any government that you exist within that has a central bank, that has a Federal Reserve, that has any of these things, they can actually take your time and energy and print more of it without really expending time and energy. And that's what makes some currencies, some could argue the US dollar, disingenuous. And so people are chasing that thing. Well, that was the benefit of Bitcoin in the beginning. The benefit of Bitcoin was that it's a money that can't be corrupted, can't be printed, can't be made more of. So you could store your time and your energy across time. So that is what I would answer. That's what Bitcoin is. That's the simplest terms. We can get into technical things. Bitcoin is a way to save your time and energy across time without it being devalued.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know that opens up tons of questions for people. Why is that true? All the different things. So I'm going to kick it back to you, Warren. Yeah, I'm going to let you just like kind of, so this is different than some of our other episodes we talked about. Like, I'm going to let you interview style this. Like, what questions does that prompt, or what, let you maybe play CNN, audience.
Fox News you real quick. So
like, that's right, exactly.
So we talked a little bit about money, and then we talked about what Bitcoin is, right? And so we know the problem with money today, right? The kind of currency that we're used to, cash, and so Bitcoin is a alternative to, a counterpart to these other sources of currency, right? So do you know about the 2008 thing that happened in Zimbabwe? So in Zimbabwe in 2008, $1 US was worth 2.6 trillion Zimbabwe dollars in 2008.
Right.
This is up in 2005, it was just $10,000. 10,000 Zimbabwe dollars equaled $1. And hyperinflation drove it up to $2.6 trillion. So I think most people who deal with money, they're concerned that their money is losing value. Right. Because so go into kind of explain, like, how does the current US dollar or other forms of currency lose value? Like, how does that happen?
Right. So, well, and before we move on, one of my favorite memes, one of my favorite kind of imagery is like, in speaking about Zimbabwe, they printed $1 trillion notes. So dollar notes is really just a representation of, again, that time and energy, that store of value over. And so for what, 50 cents, you can buy a $1 trillion Zimbabwe note. And a lot of people use them as bookmarks, especially what we call Bitcoiners, like people who believe in what Bitcoin is doing, right? They use them as bookmarks as a reminder. Like the, you talked about the US dollar. And I think one of the misconceptions about the US dollar is that it's too big to fail. Well, as far as time goes, across time and space, math is insurmountable. You cannot change math. Math is true or it's false, right? You have an equation, you have percentages, you have research you can do. And once the math says something, and it actually says it, you're not manipulating it, right? You just do math equations. They're either true or false. And so what is true is that a lot of analysis has been done. And when a country, which for those that don't know, gross domestic product is basically the production of your entire country for a year. Whatever your country produces, when that GDP, right? Let's say that's at 100%, right? So this is 100% of your goods. When your debt as a country crosses 120% of that. So when your debt as a country is 20% more than your GDP year over year, there's been 50, I believe the number is 53 sovereign nations that have hit 120% debt to GDP. 51, their currencies have basically exploded and been unusable. They've been debased is what it's called. The only two countries that have survived, and I'm putting this in very strong quotes so far, is the Japanese yen and the US dollar. The Japanese yen survived because the Japanese government began buying their own treasury bonds to make it look like they were very in demand and valued. The problem is their debt to GDP, which is teetering on insanity right now, is something like 245%. So their debt is almost 3 times their value as a country, which is, by the way, those chickens will come home to roost soon enough. And we could get into a lot of financial details about that, but the other country that has survived it so far is the US, but we've only recently crossed the threshold and we are the world's reserve currency. So what's happened to the US dollar? Some could argue the problems began in the US dollar in the 1930s, where we began doing fractional reserve banking. And what that meant was bankers decided they only had to have a certain amount of gold or cash on hand to match their outgoing money. So when you get a home loan, that bank does not have to have gold or currency that backs the home loan that they send out to you. And the idea was, it started early on. The first dollars were really just pieces of paper you would trade for gold. So you would send in your gold, you give your gold to the bank, they give you paper back. Well, what banks began to realize, and by the way, you can read all about this in books like The Bitcoin Standard, The Creature of Jekyll Island. Different books have been written about this. Broken Money by Lynn Alden. There's all kinds of books over and over again where they talk about the idea that bankers realized nobody's coming back for their gold. So what we're going to do is loan money out against that gold. We're going to basically sell our gold. We're going to use that money that we have that nobody ever really comes for. And we're going to set laws in place where we only have to have a fraction of it to hold anyway, because nobody really comes back for it. Well, the problem is, and as happens often, when you do something dishonorable to bring yourself wealth, it's going to backfire. And it may backfire, in long term or short term. But eventually, I believe what the Bible says about it. You are going to, the borrower is a slave to the lender. So, and that's biblical. And so what banks did was basically borrow from themselves. That's what right now, when US dollars are printed without backing, which the gold standard is what we used to have. We had to have gold to back all those dollars. 1971, we got rid of that to pay back war debt. Okay. Well, here's the problem with that. Now you can print as much as you want and you don't have any time or energy expelled to back those dollars. Digging up gold, melting it, making gold bars, something of value that a currency around the world that people value is gold, something that the world valued to back your money, that is what made sure you couldn't corrupt it. When we got rid of the gold standard, which was really just a promise that we'll pay back money that we overprint past the gold we own, when we got rid of that, 1971, we promised we'd only do it a little bit. By 1973, we just said open game. You can print whatever you want, whatever we need, and we'll just pay it back over time. That's like using a credit card to pay back your credit card. And everybody knows credit card debt rolls. Like, you can listen to Dave Ramsey. You can listen to all kinds of financial analysts tell you like paying back debt with debt doesn't work because you still owe on the new debt that you just created. Debt consolidation, right? You put it all on one credit card. Well, the problem is you still owe all that money back. It just lower APR. Anyway, we can get all into that. My whole point is the challenge with the US dollar on down, I believe, was really just human greed. We didn't want to do the right thing. And by the way, politics kind of created this too. Who wants to be the politician that says we're going to do the right thing with our money? I would argue that's like a bad platform because people are selfish and they're like, well, but hold on, I want more money in the next 4 years. So you're telling me we have to cut Social Security, we have to cut Medicaid because we way overprinted our money. So now I can't get those free things from the government or the taxes I paid into those things, I can't get those back. The truth is we don't have it, right? If we were being honest about our budget, if we were a home, if we were just a family of 4, right? The debt that we have as a country was represented as a family of 4, we would be so in debt we could never pay it back. Like we could work our whole rest of our lives, thousands of years even, and not pay it back. Yeah. So we're spending billions a day in more debt. And so literally every US citizen in America this past year took on $3,000 more of debt if you base our country's debt as total divided by the amount of citizens we have. So we're continuing to take on debt. And what does that mean? Because we know money now is time and energy in abstract form. What does printing money look like when you don't do any work to earn it? It looks like stealing money from the future. So eventually you steal enough money from the future, you're not going to have anything left that is really honorable money. And what happens? It debases it, devalues. People wake up and it's not valuable. Here's the real problem we face. 70% of all transactions on planet Earth happen in the US dollar. Wow. So the mythology that's been built up because of that, 70% of all transactions, US dollar. The mythology that's built up because of that is it's too big to fail. We'll just print more. We'll just do more. So you mentioned 2008 Zimbabwe. Well, in 2009, the European central banks got bailed out again by the banks. The big banks got bailed out by European Central Bank printing money. That was the impetus for Bitcoin. There were cryptographers who realized they could create secure forms of transaction digitally that no one could hack into because of the cryptography. It started as the idea of eCash and Adam Beck, like shout out to all those guys, Hal Finney, way before 2009. There was the idea of cryptography and eCash where they realized like people can't get into this thing. Well, then these same guys watch the central banks around the world print money, our Federal Reserve print money into oblivion. And they're like, hold on. So we're working hard. I'm saving up to $1 million for retirement for 30 years. And what you're telling me is you're printing enough money that my $1 million is now not giving me the same lifestyle 5 years later, right? You're changing my lifestyle, but I'm trying to do my best to be honorable and save in something where across time, my time and energy is still valuable. So what did they do? Hey, we got to get out of this system. We got to escape this, man. So they're called crypto anarchists. I actually would just say like crypto revolutionaries. They were like, we got to create a form of money that could protect us. In comes Bitcoin, the first cryptocurrency. So that is what Bitcoin did. That is the issue with, I think I've described your question, like what's the issue with the US dollar? It's that somebody can make more. And these cryptographers were like, let's make 21 million Bitcoin, and that's it. Now, those people hearing this right now that have never heard about Bitcoin or don't know what's going on, you're going to say, how can you divide, let's call them dollars. If you only had $21 million across all of humanity for 8 billion people, it really sounds like somebody's going to be left without money. The problem with that logic is that the world should be deflationary. So we're used to an inflationary world where we print money, things go up in price. I've talked to you about this before. Ford vehicles, right? So Henry Ford creates the Model T, 1901, I think, somewhere around that time. Y'all forgive me about the dates. I'm not a historian, but early in the 1900s, maybe late 1800s, the automobile starts getting produced. And it's only like $100. $50. And this is like a rare item. I mean, this is like such a luxury. People are still using horses, all those things. Why would a car that's easier to make today and actually costs no man hours because it's just electricity with robots, right? Tesla, Ford, Volkswagen, all these people can create EVs, electric vehicles. They can create all these things super easily, but it costs 300 times
beyond
more.
that. Just it's
why? Because right. Everything. I was just thinking $30,000 car versus $100. But here's the challenge. Most things in the world are just a percentage of the money printed. So a car for $100, well, in the 1900s, there was only a certain amount of money printed. So it was a lot of money. $100 was an insurmountable amount of money for some people back then. So it was a luxury. Now the insurmountable amount of money for people is 100,000 because it's just a percent of the money that's been printed. So it's a lie when we talk about inflation. Oh, it's based on war. It's based on politics. Well, the only reason it'd be based on war or politics is because during that war, politicians decide we need to print more money to pay for this war. So, long-winded answer. The truth is our money has been corrupted and is no longer trustworthy unless we can confirm that it is trustworthy. And Bitcoin so far is the only one that is truly trustworthy because it's the only one who is both decentralized and has no controlling body. It is money for the people. So I'll let you ask your next question. This is like the rabbit hole where you could sit silently the rest of the pod and I could just go, but I want to make sure that we're asking the questions that we think people.
So I'm going to unpack a little bit of what you just said before I hit the question.
Yes. So go for it.
Basically, and you sped past this a little bit, so I'm going to back it up a little bit, right? When you hear someone else say something, you're like,
I tend to do that.
What did you say? So basically, and I think I know this, but to hear it again in real time, you're like, what? So basically, if you are, and I'm not giving you financial advice here, let's just be clear. If you're taking none of this is financial advice. We should have said that early on. Like you do your research.
We're
having
a conversation.
What's right with money. Welcome. You're welcome.
We're just having a conversation about what we feel.
So if you're taking your money, right, your treasure, and you're taking it to the bank and you're saying, hey, bank, keep my treasure, right? The bank is in debt. The bank is drowning in its own debt because it's using fractional, right? Fractional reserves, right?
Yeah, fractional
So the
reserves,
bank doesn't have money. You take your money to the bank and the bank's like, yes, we got more money to act, because they're in debt, right? So in essence, right? The interest rate that they pay you is the thing that makes you feel like your money's safe or secure, right? Or it's the thing it's what they pay you to be able to use your money to do fractional reserve, right?
Right.
But they really need you to bring your money to. What if people just stop taking their money to the bank?
So here's an interesting thought experiment. If people just stop taking their money to the bank, banks would obviously go out of business, right? So what they do is build a society where it teaches you need banks to be able to kind of grease the skids of transaction. You need this debit card. You need a credit card. Actually, you need this loan because you can't afford this thing without us backing you up. Here's the interesting thing about banks. Not only would they go out of business if you don't take your money, right now, if everyone on planet Earth that banked in the US went and said, I would like my money in cash, please. I would very much like all of my money back. Right now, I think it's in somewhere in the ballpark of $54 trillion of US denominated currency is held in banks. Right now, in physical form, they have 6 trillion. And these are numbers I've heard within the last year or two. So you'll forgive me if it's something, but again, let's get to the point about percentages. They hold about 10% of the money they need. And it could be lower than that now, depending on how much is printed. They hold about 10% of what they would need to be able to give you. And so there's a thing called a bank run. And that's basically everyone just going to the bank and saying, I need my money back right now, emergency. Right now, I don't know if people know this or not, and I hope I'm reaching people. If you go to your bank and you have a $5,000 or let's say $10,000 expenditure you want to pay cash for, there is a chance, and you can find videos of this online, where they don't have it, right? A bank that's worth millions of dollars and has, in theory, tons of deposits. And you, by the way, can have $100,000 in your checking account. But you go to them and say, I just want 5% of that, please, in cash. The teller will probably ask you why. The manager will tell you, well, we need 3 days to put it together, because what they're really doing, because they may not have any on hand, they're really going to get it from another bank and have literal cash dollars, like little notes, shipped to you. And then you can go back in 3 days and get it. And some people are going to raise an eyebrow and go, well, that's my money. I want it now.
It's not in the building.
They don't have it. And that's something they can't tell you. You know why they can't tell you that? You know why I shouldn't even be saying this? Because things like this said over and over again would cause a bank run. Because what you'd realize, if you're like, well, wait a minute, only 10% of people can go get their cash on hand. What if I'm in the 11th percent? What if I'm the 11th person in line at my 100-person bank? That's right. Number 11 through 100, there's odds that you will not get it. So everybody wants to be in the first quote unquote 10 people at that 100-person bank. Well, then when all 100 want to be in the first 10, guess what happens? Chaos, right? You can look at this. There was lines outside of Boston banks a few years ago when we had was it this year? It was March of this year, I think, where the 3 banks that went under, I think it was Silvergate, and I'm blanking on the names right now, but you guys can go look this up. There were 3 or 4 banks that went under just because they didn't have the money and basically got caught up. And so they were over leveraged, is what it's called. They had lent out too much money in angel investing and all these things. And it's really the tech banks, right, that really went under first. And I apologize for blanking on the name. It makes it seem like I'm making it up, but you can go look up images of people standing in line outside the bank. And if you really want to know what can happen to currencies, you can also go look at images and videos of people outside Lebanese banks. So in Lebanon, they were literally throwing Molotov cocktails, flaming bottles into the fronts of their banks because the banks were telling them, we don't have the money. And we have the currency, but it's not worth anything. So we don't have enough cash on hand because our currency got debased. And so we can't give you your money. Sorry. So people went crazy, right? There's videos of literal pallets of money in trash cans. And you can see the videographer who he lifts up the lid of the can. He pulls out all these what look like hundreds in Lebanese dollars, and then he throws them back in the can and walks away. And they're like all over the street, and there's people walking around, nobody picking them up. Now, can you imagine a scene where $100 bills in U.S. currency were floating all across the street? I got to admit, I'd be leaning over picking up a couple, right? I mean, I still have some conception that they're worth something, but we say it can't happen because U.S. dollar is too big to fail. And the truth is, it's just an amount of time. And so now that we know it's a matter of time, because remember that measure, we passed 120% debt to GDP. I believe right now we're at 123%. Anytime you pass that threshold, even if it bounces back and forth, when you pass that threshold, and I think a lot of people are hearing about this now, the interest payment on our debt is more or about equal to what our taxes take in. So we're not paying back any debt. We're just paying interest on our debt. And for people who have credit cards that have high interest rates and can't pay them, you get it. When you make that minimum payment, you're not really
you're not going anywhere,
knocking away at anything. Right. So our country's currency, it's weird to say, it might be relatively valueless now, but we just don't know it yet. The whole world is kind of in agreement that we'll continue transacting with it. So this is where Bitcoin, this is where Bitcoin becomes, exactly right. This is where Bitcoin becomes really valuable, is when you realize basically Bitcoin is a reset to a financial system that was like, we're all going to be transacting. The other thing I want to say, and we could talk about this later, is like you mentioned taking your money to the bank, right? So what does that mean you have to do? In the most practical sense, I'm taking my money and I am trusting the bank. I am trusting that this bank will have my money when I need it. I am trusting them not to do nefarious things with it. I am trusting them implicitly because they have my money. They have my gold. They have whatever it is. Bitcoin is the first actually trustless money because it's decentralized, because it has no controlling body. I don't have to trust when I transact with Bitcoin because I have a system that will verify. I don't have to just trust your word that you have the Bitcoin you say you have, because if we're transacting and I'm doing a service and you're sending me Bitcoin, I can confirm you actually have it by having your public transaction ID looked at, your public keys, whatever it is. It's trustless. You do not have to trust. You can verify.
It's
every
open,
other currency,
right?
Every other currency you have to trust.
In my mind, the way I'm thinking, and I think most people are thinking,
it's transparent.
Is when your money goes in the bank, it goes, practically it goes behind the teller in the vault, and whatever happens to it next, you don't see it. All you have is your register, and in your mind, you're thinking that it's in the vault, and every time I need some, I take some, and it's just getting less, and it's all in there, right? But that's not the case, right? So it's kind of it's a closed system, right? You put in, and it's closed. They tell you what they tell you, hey, you have $200,000, you took out 10, you have 190,000, but that's not the case. Behind the scenes, there's something else happening with the money you brought them.
Yeah, behind the scenes, they're loaning out that 190 as collateral for a house loan, in theory, right? They give out a house loan, and like somebody takes out a $500,000 loan, maybe part of that is your 190. So
you're trusting the people that they're loaning to bring the money back.
Yes,
and the bank
that not to do something.
So the whole system of trust. So basically, they're making money on your money.
Well,
right, and so really. It's you're making you are an investor, you just don't know it.
So what happens when they loan somebody out and somebody defaults on a loan and they can't pay it back?
Cuts into the profits of the bank,
right?
Hopefully the bank is charging up interest or
and they use some of your collateral, right? They use some of your collateral to do it, and then they repo that house or that car and it sells for half of what it was worth. Technically, you just lost 90,000, but the bank is saying, well, that was ours because we're fractionally reserved anyway. So here's the interesting thing. I think banks and politics and a lot of the legal, what would you say, lawfare, all the things that go on, I think it's a lot like Vegas. I think they want it to be like what happens in the bank stays in the bank. What happens in politics stays in politics. And you don't get to ask, just like that friend gets back from Vegas and everybody makes a joke. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Here's the interesting thing about that analogy, that metaphor, or that saying. That's not true. If you go to Las Vegas and you get married, that's not staying in Vegas. You go to Vegas and you make poor financial decisions on gambling and you lose all your money, you're bringing that home wherever you go. It is a lie that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Because initially you may not know.
Just like it's a lie with the bank. The
consequences.
Oh, you'll deal with the consequences at some point, right? Yeah. Same thing with the banks and politics. What's happening in there might be purposely overly convoluted so that we don't know how to ask questions, but it will someday come home to roost, and it's going to seem like a surprise to a lot of people because it's overly convoluted, but I think it's happening sooner rather than later. I think in our lifetime, Warren, God willing, that, our lifetimes continue for about double what they are now. Within the next 40 or 50 years, US dollars might be a thing where you're like, well, I'd prefer not to get paid in that. Do you have any other form of currency? Right? If I try to give you a Zimbabwe $1 trillion note, boy, that'll make you feel wealthy because the number trillion is high. But what it'll actually get you is like, a quarter of a pack of gum in the United States. And so it isn't about the numbers, right? And going back to a $21 million Bitcoin, I just want to clarify for people that are going to study what I'm saying. One Bitcoin breaks apart into 100 million pieces. So those are called Satoshis or sats. And so when you break up one Bitcoin, you get 2.1 quadrillion is the number of transactable units, right, to use. And so the cool part is we do have enough money for everybody in a deflationary system, which Bitcoin would prompt because nobody can overinflate the money based on creating new or printing, right? So you'll get the fair value of things. The other nice thing is Bitcoin is digital. So if we ever need something smaller, like a unit of something smaller than a sat that makes sense to people, and let's call it, this is totally made up by me. I don't think I've ever heard anybody else say it, but like one Satoshi could break down into 100 digis, call them like digital dollars or something. You could break them down fractionally because, again, it's just computing. It's just computing power. And saying 21 million Bitcoin was just a unit picked as like kind of a good starting point. And it just turned out to be good enough. So anyway, part of the reason, I think part of the reason you and I are talking today is I want to talk about this now because the European Central Bank just put out false narratives about Bitcoin that I think need to be pushed back against as quickly as possible because they're actually provably not true. It was said two things. Bitcoin will impoverish people because of the lack of units of measurement. There's only 21 million. There's only 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis or dollars, if you think of it that way. So how could 8 billion people transact? Well, the truth is they also said it'll impoverish people because current Bitcoiners that got in early enough will have too much control over what they have and they won't share. Well, again, in a deflationary world, those units will just become more valuable. So the Model T was $100. My thought is that if we hadn't printed money, a Tesla car would cost 50, which sounds inconceivable to people. Like there's people listening right now, like you're insane. I can't even get a $50 pair of shoes unless I go not to Nike, right? Not to Adidas. Like, and by the way, I love those shoes. I'm no shade at them. They're really just representing a percentage of the money printed. When you have a money that you can't corrupt, things will drop in value because of fair market and free market. If you're ever interested in this idea, you can read the book Price of Tomorrow, maybe The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. And he talks about why the world should be deflationary because technology gets better. Yeah. Do you mind if I give an example really quick? So, Warren, do you have an iPhone? Does that iPhone have a calculator app on it? Okay. How much did you pay for the calculator app on your iPhone?
Well, fractionally, it comes with the phone. So it's a part of the overall cost, right?
Right. Sure. But rock with me for a second. You paid for the phone and the calculator was essentially ostensibly a free add-on. I could argue that calculator is better than the calculator that my grandparents had to pay $50 for, right? That only did basic arithmetic. That calculator that can now do more advanced arithmetic is essentially free to you, right? You actually didn't extend any time or energy in getting that calculator app because if you deleted the app off your iPhone, you'd still buy the iPhone, right? Like you're not going to not buy an iPhone. So it's essentially a free part of an iPhone. So they took something technologically that was expensive and not owned by everybody and not as good technologically in a calculator, like say 1940s, 50s, to now it's free and better. So how did that happen? Because technology at its essence, at the heart of it, is deflationary. So in an inflationary world, you have to print more money to lubricate the system. Well, I just saw a video, and I think I sent this to you, of it was either a Chinese gentleman, I believe it was Chinese television, where he said we could all literally die because of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin became currency, we could all die. And what was his point? Oh, you won't be able to feed your family because there's not enough units of currency. Well, that is such an inflationary, Keynesian economic idea that it's absurd. Like bread does not have to cost $10 a loaf. It could cost a penny a loaf. The reason it costs 10 is more money is printed, but in theory, a loaf of bread and everything else, just like the calculator, should cost less because the cost of production should go down because technology has gone down. Do you know that farmers used to have to farm by hand?
Can you imagine?
Okay. This is before oxen and horses, right? And then they found oxen. And that made it a little less expensive. Horses, boom, a little less expensive.
Yeah.
Tractors should be less expensive, right? Now you got to pay for the tractor one time, but over time, man, now they have automated tractors, which the cost to build a tractor should have gone down because now you can make them quicker. And again, those are probably built with robotic arms. And if they're not, they will be soon. The cost of production, the manpower, all those things used to have hundreds of people work a field. Now you can have one guy reading a book while sitting in his automated tractor. Okay. Why does food cost more when every step of the production got easier and better with technology? Because it still represents a percent of the money printed. What does that mean? I believe, and there's evidence to prove it based on what I'm saying now, and I'd love to hear questions from people on a Bitcoin standard where Bitcoin backs a currency. And I'm not saying we have to get rid of the US dollar. I'm saying Bitcoin could be the gold, quote unquote, that backs the US dollar. Things denominated in US dollars would go down because when you can't make more Bitcoin and more Bitcoin is valuable, it's more valuable, and you put money against it, you get more money per Bitcoin, which means that bread denominated in Bitcoin costs less Bitcoin and maybe more US dollars. So things are deflationary in a Bitcoin standard, and I can prove it if you'd like me to explain that.
Yeah.
So you ready? This is the last example, and then I'm going to let you ask your next question. I promise I'll let you cook. So a home, when Bitcoin started in 2009, it was worth a penny. And then let's say it got to $1. Okay, ready? So when Bitcoin got to $1, it would cost you 200,000 Bitcoin to buy a home for 200,000 US dollars. Okay, dollar Bitcoin, got it? In today's value, it costs you less than 4 Bitcoin to buy a $200,000 house. At the filming of today, just for history's sake, we're at 67,000 and odd, 67.3. That is less than 4 Bitcoin for a $200,000 house. And you used to have to give 200,000 Bitcoin. And all along the way, by the way, you can find different periods of time where it was 50 Bitcoin for a $200,000 house because Bitcoin hit $4,000, right? Someday, a $200,000 house will not even be close to a full Bitcoin because the price of making that house gets less and less because of technology and manpower. And Bitcoin matches the productivity that creates deflation. So anyway, that's my proof to you that a deflationary world can exist because we found a currency that you can't destroy. Bang.
So practically.
I know.
I'm like, whoa. Whoa.
Yeah,
so,
there's a lot to digest.
So we're like more than halfway through like the meat of what we're talking about here. And so I want to do a couple caveats for people listening to us. We're lowercase church here, right? So
please, yeah.
We're giving you practical information to use in a world that is not your forever existence, right? This is just your temporary existence, right?
Sure.
And so don't get it confused. Yes. We don't trust in man-made things, right? Our trust is not in man-made things. Our trust is in God. He is what backs us, period.
Yeah.
Right. But that doesn't give us a free pass to not pay attention to what is happening in the world that we exist in. Right. So I want to make that kind of clear. I don't want you to be like, well, it sounds like you guys don't really believe in God. We do. We actually put Jesus Christ at the head of our lives, at the head of our finances. And this is one reason why we look for things that cannot be manipulated. And there are very few in this world, things that can be manipulated, right? And one thing that cannot, and that's the power of God, can never be manipulated.
That's right.
And so with that being said, take the information that we're talking about and please run it through the filter of God in your life and the position he has in your life. Do not, don't just take our word for it, right? Trust God with everything, but also investigate Bitcoin. I want to put that out there. I don't want you to make Bitcoin like it is some savior of the world. There's only one savior of the world, and that's Jesus.
Right.
Got to be clear about that. Number two, we love America. Some things we're talking about banks, we're talking about US dollars and all these different things. We're Americans. I spent 21 years defending this country. But every family, every situation, every church has problems. And just because you address the problems
Yes.
does not mean you hate the thing, right? I think we want the best for our country, where we live, for our we have children. And so I think this information is necessary. It's when you don't talk about what is happening when you can't get to a solution. So I know this feels tough. It feels real strong, right? But it's reality. These are problems that we need our country to address. We need to really bring to the table the financial knowledge for this generation, the next, and the ones to follow. And so, yes, God provides. And sometimes what he provides is you the ability to get the information and apply it accordingly.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes the miracle is your ability to look at things, examine them, investigate them, and make smart decisions. Sometimes that's the miracle. It's not like, oh, everything's all good. And you know, so I want to kind of, you know, say that before we kind of like carry on. So my question for people who don't kind of understand the whole physical part of Bitcoin, we understand that it's essentially data. It's essentially, you know, it's a computer program. Mm-hmm. For lack of better terms, to kind of, you know, it's not paper, it's not gold, it's a computer program. So for those people who are like, how is that money? And what happens if the computer dies? Or what happens if the computer gets a virus? Or what happens if technology changes and we no longer use computers? So, you know, because I think that was one of the first things that hit me, like, so I've lost a file before. I've been working on a document and then it goes away. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you're telling me this is a good thing, but what if the server dies, someone bombs it or whatever? How can I trust something that is not tangible? You know, like, so, you know, banks have different locations. So if this one ain't got it, maybe this one has it. But where is Bitcoin? And is it susceptible to being hacked, attacked, destroyed, gone forever? Could it be a scam? Like, so from your perspective and your knowledge level, kind of unpack that.
Okay. So the two things I would say, the first thing is, I do understand. Like, I totally get that is the thought that people have. And it's the question I asked as well. And like I said before, if you have doubts, do your research, like go in, find the answer, question things. Everything I've said, like Warren mentioned before, put it up against all the Bitcoin research you can find and put it up against the Bible and see what the Bible says about finances and money. See what it says about being honorable in your transactions. So what I would say is that at one point, Bitcoin had to start, and it started on a computer and then other computers. And then what happened is it gained traction. So I openly admit that earlier in Bitcoin's existence, it could have been co-opted by a government. It could have been taken over. It could be right now that the government is running computers and mining Bitcoin and running Bitcoin nodes to transact, right? The nice thing is because there was no central authority, they had to set up a situation where you have to run the computer, right, to mine Bitcoin. So what is Bitcoin mining? Mining is just a computer that is specially made to guess a number. That's it. It's a computer guessing a number. And that's how cryptography works, is if you guess the correct number in the chain of numbers that it's looking for next, then you did proof of work, is what it's called. You spent electricity and you ran that computer. Now you get the Bitcoin reward. And that is how Satoshi Nakamoto, that's the pseudonymous either person or group that created Bitcoin, that's how they conceived of getting it out into the world fairly, is if you run a computer, I don't care if you're the US government, the Chinese government, Russian spies, I don't care who you are. If you run that computer and you get the Bitcoin code going on your computer and your computer guesses that number, you get that what's called a block reward on the time chain. So people call it blockchains. Technically in Bitcoin, it was called a time chain because about every 10 minutes, that's how they set the difficulty of guessing that number. About every 10 minutes or so on average, computers will guess the new number. And so as more computers come online, it's actually harder. That's part of the beauty of the coding that happened. It's harder for your computer to guess the number, and that's called a difficulty adjustment. With more computational power, it's a lower percentage chance that you guess the number, which makes sense, by the way. It's fair. If you and I were the only people running what's called a Bitcoin ASIC, where it's just a computer trying to guess the number, and you were half of the whole Bitcoin network of computers and I was half, well, we each have a 50% chance that we guess the number and get the Bitcoin reward, right? If there's thousands of us, I now have a 1 in 1,000 chance. The beauty is more and more people put on miners because they realized the value of the network, and it became decentralized. The only network that is truly decentralized is Bitcoin. I want to be clear about that. From Ethereum and Solana and Ripple all the way down, those are all would be considered securities. It doesn't really matter what the government says about it. Like, a security is something you invest in and the value can be controlled by a group of people who put in effort. Bitcoin, back in 2010, in about October, I believe, Satoshi said, I'm giving you the code. It's now open source and I'm leaving. Bye. Like, this has to be not controlled by me or anyone else, because if something has a CEO, it could be susceptible to human greed, right? They can make more of it. The only way to make more Bitcoin is to mine it through the computer code and get it in an honest way. So for the people that are like, man, you sound like you're worshiping Bitcoin. I'm not. I do think Jesus is the most important thing. In fact, I want to spend most of our episodes talking about Jesus, and I'm going to talk about him now in the Bitcoin episode. Jesus talked about principles of money, being honorable, being debt-free, earning it in an honest way. So far, after 1971, it could be argued 1930, the US dollar was just about the only honest currency. Bitcoin now takes that trophy, that crown of being the only truly honest currency, because you can't make more of it. You can't fake that you got it. If you fake it, you mentioned something about the computers being hacked. The nice thing about it being decentralized is you can hack one of the computers, one ASIC. The nice thing about cryptography is it will notice right away that there was a hack, and it will basically take that computer off the network. And then when it gets hacked, and let's say one of the computers verifies it, the other computers will say, we don't recognize that to be the next number in the chain, cryptographically speaking. So you must have hacked it. Bye. It just won't verify the number. So let's say a government, right? Because it's so decentralized. Let's use China as an example. If you took every computer in mainland China, every single one, every ounce of computing power, and tried to hack Bitcoin, like, let's do it, let's hack it, you would need about 5 times more than exists in mainland China in total, every computer. Because the network is so big in Bitcoin, there's so many miners online that it promotes good behavior, because the cost to China in terms of billions and billions of dollars they'd have to pay to get that much computing power online to try to hack Bitcoin, it actually makes more financial sense to just play ball and put miners online. Just mine your own Bitcoin. And that's how you'd play ball. A hack to the Bitcoin network as of today is essentially impossible. I think it's something like it would take 1,000 years to guess one person's seed phrase, which is a 12-word phrase that protects your Bitcoin. It's like a password. You get random 12 words out of a set of 1,024 words. You get 12 words in a random order that no one else will ever have. And it would take something like 1,000 years to get you. I saw a graphic the other day. You would have to win the Powerball 9 times in a row to have the same percent odds of guessing someone's
9 times in a row?
Not once, not twice. You'd have to win Powerball 9 times in a row, and that's random lottery numbers. That's how secure your seed phrase is in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is like having your own Swiss bank account. This is why you'll hear negative things from governments about it, because they don't want you to be free of a taxable event. They need their taxes because they've overprinted the money. There is no central authority in Bitcoin that's going to come at you because you're not paying your Bitcoin taxes, because you've already done the proof of work. You've already earned it. You ran the electricity. And the network, you do pay fees, like it's a small fee. Like you can move $1 million for $1 now. But you pay the fees to the network so that the electricity is worth running. And that's part of the block reward. So if you run a Bitcoin miner, you get the fees and the block reward, which right now is 3 Bitcoin every 10 minutes, roughly 3.125. But at the beginning of the network, it was 50 Bitcoin per 10 minutes. So it like really decentralized quickly. And then there's a thing called the halving every 4 years that's programmed in where the block reward gets cut in half every year to promote more competition, more free market. So I know I just hit a ton of big facts and all those things, but I don't believe the network can be hacked because the math says that it would be impossible until we have quantum computing. The one caveat I would say is when we have quantum computing that could hack Bitcoin, we will also be using quantum computing to protect it because people are valuing it at that rate. So Jesus will save your soul. But I don't think it's sacrilegious to then follow that up with Bitcoin being the second most important thing because that will save your time and energy into the future. People find it sacrilegious when I say Bitcoin and Jesus have things in common. And what I mean by that isn't one will save your eternal soul, because only Jesus can do that. The thing they have in common is scarcity. There's only one honest money. There's only one way to heaven. And that's it. That's the thing. That's the scarcity. Beyond that, that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I think in our world, if you find a way to have financial freedom that's not corruptible, then you can both take care of your family for generations, but also bless people at a higher rate. And I think so many people are distracted by the rat race of chasing the US dollar, and then they get printed into oblivion. So your $1 million you save for retirement is now worth what would be $250,000 today. So you can't retire. All the people want to retiring at 60 and like spend time with their grandkids, they got to work till they're 80. All the people going to retire at 75, they're just never going to retire. And you're sitting there wondering like, man, I worked just as hard as I would have before. I can't work any harder. I can't fight this machine. What's happening? Your retirement is just like a car, just like everything else. That iPhone you buy, it's just a percent of the money printed. So that's why your grandparents' house that they sold, 100 years after they bought it, even though they made no improvements, it was worth more, even though it's 100 years older and like starting to break down. Why? Because that house represents a percent of the money printed. There are better stores of value. You and I talked about this before. Gold, pretty good store of value, man. Over time, it's been awesome. Houses, pretty good, except you got to take care of those. Like those can be stolen at gunpoint. Somebody could take your gold. Somebody could make you move out of your house or, bomb it or something like that. Bitcoin, if I have 12 words memorized in my head, there's nothing you can do to get my Bitcoin except earn it honorably. You provide me a service, you provide me a relationship, you provide me whatever makes me want to send you Bitcoin, right? You're my kids. It's probably just like, I love you, right? You're a guy working on my house. You can't break into my safe and steal my gold because my gold is locked in my head with 12 words. And good luck getting that out of me if I don't want to give it to you. So Bitcoin is really cool. Now this is like going way down a rabbit hole because it saves your value, and Bitcoin is an idea because it's 12 words protecting it. So if I got those 12 words as an idea, that's it. You can actually fly to a different country tomorrow and transact with Bitcoin, use El Salvador as an example, and just have the 12 words memorized. I don't have to take anything on the airplane. So it promotes countries playing ball rather than fighting against Bitcoin. But there are some who are fighting it because they just want to do everything desperately to make people run away from it because they know it takes away their power over you. Go ahead.
So has Bitcoin come up
Thanks,
with a way to...
There's a lot.
A way to retrieve Satoshis or Bitcoins that are lost forever? Say your 12 word phrase is in your head, not written down anywhere, not shared with anybody, and you are capacitated, or you have an accident, you have short-term memory loss, and those 12 words are gone. Is there does that just lower the inventory of Bitcoin that's available? Like, is that Bitcoin locked up forever?
Yes. Yeah, that's the short answer. You lose it forever. And I know that sounds scary. Bitcoin is the ultimate personal responsibility money. Like, you take personal responsibility for your ownership of it. That way, you're free from anybody manipulating it, but you're also responsible for it. So, for instance, I have my seed phrase etched in metal in a safe that is fingerprint unlockable. You know, you can get fingerprint access, and that's it. So in theory, I guess somebody could cut my finger off and get my seed phrase. But in order to do that, I trust that there are things in, no, there are things in place where I imagine, and some of that has to do with my Second Amendment rights, if you will. Some of that has to do with, me trusting God and just like, look, but if it ever came to it, I do have a way to dispose of said piece of metal so that nobody can get it. And then my wife and I will have the seed phrase. We will have it, and that's trusting my wife too, by the way. I made my Bitcoin trustful instead of trustless, which is the advantage of it, but because I trust my wife. So you get to choose who you trust with it. It's not a bank. It's not some teller who's like down on his luck and maybe going to hack the system, or you know what I mean? Like you don't have to trust anybody. And so it is the ultimate responsibility money, though. You have to bear the responsibility for your wealth that you're going to transfer over time. And I think that was true if you hold gold bars, if you have cash under your mattress, like your house burns down, you got cash in your mattress, you better have a way to get it out. I actually would say Bitcoin is more secure than something physical because of that. Like you can transport it just by knowing your 12 words and then buying what's called a cold card. It's cold storage. Maybe we do a Bitcoin episode too, and I can go into that stuff. But the ways you secure it, but the thing you need to know is it's a money somebody can't corrupt. So as it goes up in value, you will get less of it for your US dollars because you're trading an inferior currency, which is the US dollar, for a superior one in Bitcoin. The nice thing is you're never too late. Don't look at the price of Bitcoin and think you're too late. The goal is to just get as many Satoshis as you can while knowing that, like what Warren just brought up, there's a large percentage of the network that before Bitcoin was as established as it is, people lost their seed phrases. So there's millions of Bitcoin, it's theorized, that haven't moved for 12, 13, 14 years of the network's lifetime at 15. They haven't moved, so they're considered dead. Now, maybe not all of them are dead, but there's a high percentage chance that people just transacted with Bitcoin and forgot the seed phrase, forgot their login, and it's just gone. It's just gone because you can't, once it's locked in somebody else's wallet, you can't get it unless you do the honorable thing or hack the wallet. And like we talked about, hacking the wallet is like so hard. It's not even worth the effort. Anyway, so yeah, it's gone. And I think that's a feature, not a bug. I think it's a feature that you have full control over your wealth, not a bug where you go, well, I need to trust somebody else. Now there's things called multi-sig. Let me not a multi-signature wallet where you can work with a company. They have part of the signature that's required. And then you and a third party, like me and my wife, would both have to call, verify our signatures digitally. And then they would have the other signature and say, okay, both of you seem like you're good. So that really prevents people stealing it with like a wrench attack is what they call it. Like somebody showing up with a wrench and threatening you. Well, if my wife's not around, right? Okay, let's say she is around. Now they have 2/3 of our seed phrase. If you call the company and you give them a false phrase, they know you're under duress. So they do not open the wallet. So then how can somebody know? So the truth is it's going to promote good behavior. And so in saying all that, I actually think, and I don't feel ashamed in saying this. Some people question this or call it sacrilegious. I think Bitcoin is the most honorable Christian money I could ever think of. Like, Christians should transact. We should trust God. But like you said, sometimes God brings you an idea. Can I point out that Noah didn't just sit around?
Yep.
And then God built the ark, right? He had to go cut the wood. He had to go build it. He had to enlist his family. He got his friends in, friends. That's like That's not actually true.
Mm-hmm.
People made fun of him in the Bible. So you can bring in whoever you want. The truth is, some people are going to laugh at you. The real truth is, God brings you knowledge and wisdom in how to use it, but we live by Christian principles. We don't live by Christian dollars. Fun fact, Jesus never used a US dollar. So when you say it's sacrilegious to say Bitcoin seems more secure and more like faith-based money than the dollar, I don't know why that's controversial or sacrilegious. But for sure, if you say to somebody, Jesus and Bitcoin have something in common, Christians especially, I've had them flare up. Whoa, how can you say that? Well, that's like me saying, like, I think my friend Warren and Jesus have something in common. They're both right. They're both honorable, right? They both try to live. Now, the difference is Jesus was perfect. I'm not saying Bitcoin's perfect, but I'm saying it is the closest thing to matching the honor with which Jesus talked about money compared to all the other currencies, right? Anyway, I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole here. I would say read the book, The Bitcoin Standard, and then the book, The Price of Tomorrow. And then as you read those books, Broken Money by Lynn Alden, on and on and on. There's just so many ways that you can do your research on Bitcoin. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I may even put a link down to river.com. That's a company that is trustworthy. They show their Bitcoin reserves where you can buy it. And basically, just like we talked about fractional reserve banking, this is a 100% reserve company where they make public how much Bitcoin they have and how much Bitcoin people own with them, right? That you own that can be sent to your cold storage that we talked about with the 12 words. They're proving 100% reserves. So they're not trying to be distrustworthy. Is that a word? Untrustworthy, fractional, anything, right? It's a better bank. And I think that's what Bitcoin will do, is help change the financial world. And then Jesus will be a part of that and everything else, changing the world. But that's why I think this topic is so important, because I think it gives an access point to understanding maybe some corruption that's gone on and maybe some ways that you can get out of it. And it might bring people some more peace. And I think that's what Lowercase Church is about, is like, we're trying to talk about things that will help bring people peace.
Yeah.
And we're going to be honest with people. So, anyway, Warren, I appreciate y'all and everybody listening. Thanks for bearing with the like flood of facts that I just brought. The absolute tidal wave of information. If you guys have more questions, let me know. I'm sure I'm going to share this with people and send it to them, because it's just a way to condense my thoughts on it. And I do appreciate your questions. If we get more questions, like the truth is, we might do an episode.
Might be a part two,
because there's just so much more we could talk about. There's so much. Yeah. And can I just say on a personal note, thank you for listening, man. Like, it matters to me that your financial future will be a little more secure because you trusted me, and your trust means a lot, because there's times I talk to people and just like with Jesus, remember, and I don't, again, not sacrilegious. I'm not comparing the value of the two, but when I talk to people about Jesus and Bitcoin, my goal is to hopefully save them from pain. Like, it is hard to watch somebody ignore you and know that you know through your experience, through the research you've done, like, Jesus will save your soul, your family, your future. Bitcoin is just going to save your wallet. And it turns out that a wallet, by the way, just to be clear about at Jesus, he talked about money almost more than anything else, right? It's like 200 something references in the Bible to money. So like, why would Jesus talk about money so much if it didn't impact us so greatly? And so the lie that we've been told is like, oh, if we care about money at all, then it's somehow like not trusting Jesus. No, Jesus was like, hold on, this is how you do money honorably. I actually think those principles line up very well with how Bitcoin has been designed. So I hope you guys listen. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, let us know in the comments if you have any questions, and we'll do an episode 2. We'll keep it going. So you want to close us out, big dog? I know that's unusual because usually we intro and then, but
Absolutely.
Pray us out, man.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this opportunity we have to spend time together, Lord, in your presence and talk about things that practically affect us in this life, God. Lord, I pray for your direction and your guidance. Lord, I hope that the information that we talked about today, Lord, reaches someone who really is hungry to go deeper into finances, deeper into their treasure. and where they store it, God. God, I pray that you bring clarity, direction, and prosperity, Lord. God, we just thank you for this opportunity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen, you guys. So finish out with one of my favorite phrases is if you want to change your life, there's 5 words I share. Love Jesus and buy Bitcoin. So that's anyway, I love you guys. I always want to tell you all the truth.
Man.
Warren, I appreciate you, man.
Absolutely.
We'll see you all in the next one, man.
Bro.